Good morning, church. Man, it is good to be back with you guys. My name is Jessy Vera. I'm the campus minister here at Hope Waukee. And there's a lot of new faces, so I feel some might be like, who's that guy? Because I haven't been here all summer. This summer, I've been accomplishing my chaplaincy requirement downtown at the hospital as part of my seminary process to become a pastor. So I haven't been able to be here all summer long, but I'm excited to be here now. And I mean, what a way to kick off a message, right? I mean, come on. When do you ever get to come to church and hear a little T-Swift? And don't think I didn't hear you singing a little bit louder to that than the worship set. We're going to have some conversations a little bit later. I think as I was looking out at people, there was a lot of different reactions. There were some people smiling there with it, so a lot of people singing. There were a few confused faces. You might be in that category of people that are like, why are we singing Taylor Swift in church? If you're in that category, you have good company, because Riley, who stood right here, was also in that category. When I first told him I would like the song Anti-Hero to be sung right before the message, he went like this. So, you're in good company here. There's some people that are here with it, and there's some people who are slowly making their way to their seat right now that did it because their boss told them to. So, all kinds are present. But here's the reason I wanted to do this song. There is a method to the madness. This song is extremely introspective. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this song, why? Where have you been for the past 2 years since this came out? Are you not aware of the global phenom known as T-Swift and her massive Eras tour, which costs a deed to your house and your firstborn child to get a ticket, which, from what I've seen in your social media posts, a majority of the people in this room signed over your children to go to that tour when it came through Kansas City or somewhere close. So, this song was a massive hit for her back in 2022. The song's called Anti-Hero. It was on her album Midnights. And Taylor has said that it's one of her favorite songs that she's ever written, largely because of how honest it is. And it was a huge hit for her. It broke global U.S. streaming records on Spotify in its first day. In its first 24 hours, it had 17.4 million streams, just this one song when it came out. And Taylor loves it so much because she says, it is this song that she feels is extremely honest. And she did this Instagram interview where she had this to say about the song. She said, "I don't think I've delved this far into my insecurities in this detail before. I struggle a lot with the idea that my life has become unmanageably sized. And not to sound too dark, I struggle with the idea of not feeling like a person. This song really is a real guided tour throughout all of the things I tend to hate about myself." Now, we all hate things about ourselves. It's all of those aspects of the things we dislike and like about ourselves that we have to come to terms with if we're going to be this person. Taylor is recognizing that there's a problem, and her life has gotten, like she says, too big sometimes that she doesn't even quite feel like the person that she wants to be. And this song does exactly what we're going to be doing here today. It gets real. It gets honest with our own insecurities, the things that are bothering us. And today we're going to do a little bit of that as well. This isn't going to be one of those fuzzy, warm, good feeling kind of messages. This one we're going to dig into a little bit into the things that we don't really like about ourselves or like to admit about ourselves. So if you are a Hope kid here, because we don't have Hope kids today, parents, turn to your kids and say, "Hold on." Production, if you could get the preview slide going up there for me, that would be super helpful. Thank you. So we are going to be digging in a little bit as we're going into this. Jumping around. As we're kind of digging into this, and we're gonna have a little bit of a time of uncomfortability through this, because but before we get to that, we've been going through this sermon series, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Christians. We started this last week. We're going to be spending these next several weeks going through Romans 12 and seeing what it has to teach us about what it means to have these habits of highly effective Christians. But before we get into kind of the meat of today, I want to stop right there and kind of talk about what this sermon series means. Because on the surface, when you look at this, it's based off a very popular book. It can feel like this might be a kind of a self-help kind of a message. And what I wanted to do was encourage you that it's not that. But let's talk about a couple of the words we see in this. First, I want to talk about the word habits. Habits is a word that we have an interesting relationship with in our culture today. It's not a word that we normally associate with a positive thing. Habits are usually negative things in our lives when we talk about them. Maybe it's things like I eat too much, or I drink too much, or I cut my toenails in the living room, which, by the way, if that is you, can I just say stop? That's gross. Okay, nobody wants to be watching AGT and look over and see your big old nasty toenail sitting there on the carpet. You cut that sucker in the bathroom, over the toilet, or over the garbage can, or you go to the corner of the backyard where nobody has to deal with that. You might be sensing that this is something I've dealt with. I have, and it's gross. I don't like having my morning cereal and looking down below me, below the breakfast table, and seeing a toenail. It's gross. So if that's you, stop it. Don't do that anymore. So that's one part of habits. I digress. The other part of habits is we can talk about these also when we're talking about developing good patterns, things that we want to do in our lives. Good habits is a part of this conversation as well. And these are things like, I'd love to spend more time in the Bible every day, or, I'd like to work out more. I would like to have a more devoted prayer time. I'd like to lose some weight and get a good, healthy diet for my life. This is part of that equation as well. Habits are actions that are ingrained, that have become natural because of continued repetition. And when we're using that word habits throughout this series, this is how we're talking about that. These are the things that we do without thinking, but accomplish with skill and precision. So part of our hope throughout this series is that we're focusing on some good habits that we can develop in our lives that will be helpful. But if you're anything like me, we have this kind of love-hate relationship with habits, with breaking bad ones, with developing new ones. I can't tell you how many workout plans, diet plans that I have been on in my 44 years of life. We have this kind of tense relationship with learning to do this because it takes time and it's hard work. Popular opinion, or what I kind of always have heard, is that to develop a new habit or to break a bad one, it takes 21 days. Some people say 90 days. Well, actually, what the European Journal of Social Psychology discovered is that it actually takes 66 days to form a new habit and a range of somewhere between 18 and 254 days to break a bad one, which can feel pretty frustrating when it's something that we would like to change about ourselves, but it's going to take potentially a long time and a lot of work and a lot of commitment. So what we need to know about that is these things we're talking about in these next few weeks, the things that we're going to be talking about today, we need to give ourselves some grace with, because these aren't quick fixes. These are things that will take time and commitment and take energy, will take us prioritizing these things in our life for them to become a habit, for them to become something that are effective in our lives and in our Christian walks. Which leads me to the next phrase. What does it mean to be a highly effective Christian? Those are words that we don't normally associate with Christianity. Christianity is something that we talk about usually in terms of relationship, right? So why do we have these qualitative measures on relationship? Shouldn't we be using more language that's like ooey gooey love and devotion type language when we're talking about something that is largely a relationship? Why are we using these words like effective and things like that? When I do pre-marriage counseling with couples, they're often surprised. I think a lot of them come in thinking that the sessions that we spend together are largely going to be, well, let's pick some verses, let's pick some music, and let's get this party started. But we actually spend several weeks digging into who they are as people, what their birth order tells us about them, how they handle conflict, what their personality type and Enneagram type is, and how that informs their behavior in relationship. We spend several weeks talking about what it looks like to have an effective relationship in this marriage. I even have them write up a mission statement for what they want their marriage to look like. Very different than what the expectations normally are. But when we have these kinds of conversations, even about the most important relationships in our lives, these set us up for potential success in these most important relationships. And so we're spending these several weeks talking about what it looks like to have an effective faith life, because this is an important relationship in our life, and this is an important thing to us. And so it's best to talk about, well, what have we seen throughout history in Christians that we look up to that are things that we would like to emulate, that we want our lives to kind of look like? Because when it comes to our Christian faith, there's many people that can just be Christian by name, but it really has no effect on their life whatsoever. But when we're talking about living a life that is a life of an effective Christian, then what we're talking about is a life of quality and a life that bears fruit. So in these several weeks, we're digging into this, and Paul knew this. That's why in the book of Romans, after spending all this time in the first 11 chapters talking about what Jesus did for us, he spends this next chunk of time, and specifically chapter 12, talking about what does it look like to live this out in your life, in your church, to live this faith out, to be Christians that feel like this relationship is a deep and meaningful relationship with our Lord and Savior, and a relationship that bears fruit in our own lives and bears fruit for generations to come. But Paul knows this can be a challenging thing. So if I dig in here to the scripture verse that we've been getting through in Romans 12 and what was read today, chapter 3 and 6, I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. I laid out several different phrases of what we're going to be going through. I'm going to kind of I'm going to give away all the sermons that John's going to preach here in the next weeks to come. I'm going to give them away right now, because this is what an effective Christian looks like. This is the quality and the fruit that we're hoping to bear. So, last night as I was running this message, my wife said to me, "Isn't this a family worship weekend? Isn't there going to be a bunch of Hope kids there in the room?" And I went, "Yep." So I need some help from some kids. So, all right, so here's what I'm going to need. I need like 2 or 3 people on this side that are going to help me out, that are in the Hope kids kind of age, a little bit older because you got to be able to deal with tape. And then over there, I'm going to come and get 2 or 3 over here as well. So if you're willing to come up on the side over here with Jordan and Alyssa, and you're willing to help me for a second, could you put your hand up, Hope kids? Oh, these guys are already going. Go, do it. I love the initiative. All right, you can come over here. I need 2 more people, someone coming down over here. All right, maybe 1 more over there with Jordan. Go ahead, head on right over there to where Jordan is. And what you guys are going to be doing, and I did not plan this, so this is going to take a second, y'all. Hopefully this doesn't take too long. You guys can start taping these words up on the wall and get up on the stage so that it doesn't hover around the baseboard, but it gets spread up as tall as you are up there. We're going to start setting up a few different words here to kind of represent what it means to live this effective life, this fruit. And these all come out of Romans 12. So I'm going to start over here on this side as these guys are putting these words up here. How are you guys doing? You doing good? Yep. Okay, cool. All right. Oh, good jump. That was excellent. So these words that we see on this side are ones that came right out of this whole journey we're going to be going on, that says that a Christian who bears fruit in their lives are going to have some of these trademarks And this is what we're looking at. They're going to be people that are marked by harmony, people that are sympathetic, are respectful, they're patient, they're benevolent. All right, we're doing it too nice. Just grab a strip and just stick that sucker up there. They're hospitable, they're sincere, they have humility, they're generous. All right, we got it, buddy. Good job. Good. They're enthusiastic. Excellent. What else we got coming? What's this one? Let's see it. Affectionate. Excellent.
There. We're getting fancy now.
There you go. Just stick it up there. It doesn't need to be pretty. Discerning. Awesome. You got that one?
Yes, sir.
There you go.
One.
We are, what's this one? Hospitable
And
and sincere. All right, let's say thank you to these guys over here. All right, one of you come over here with me real quick. Come here.
got it? Good deal.
What's your name? Hazel. Okay, Hazel. When we think about you, do you think your parents would describe you always, at all times, as generous, harmonious, affectionate, hospitable, respectful, sympathetic, enthusiastic, benevolent, sincere, patient, with humility and discerning? Do you think they would be like, yeah, that's my kid? Yeah, what do we think? Who's your parents? Point them out. What do you think? Do they sound like this all the time? Do you sound like this all the time? No. Thank you, guys. You guys can go ahead and head back. When I think about, when I think about my life and I compare it to the list here, it's a very humbling and sober experience. Try to put yourself in front of each of these words. Use your name in front of each one of these. And are you telling the truth? If you say, Jessy is generous, Jessy is marked by harmony, Jessy is affectionate, Jessy is hospitable, respectful, sympathetic. If you use your name in these places, is benevolent, sincere, patient, is marked by humility, is discerning, does it feel like you're telling the truth? Because for me, it doesn't. These are all things that I hope to be showing in my life, but if I really talk about what's going on in my heart and in my thought life, if we involve our thought life in this as well, then I don't believe putting my name in front of every one of these words is telling the truth. Am I alone in this, or do some other people here kind of feel like a similar thing? I feel like I tend to live, especially in that thought life, more out of this list over here. Jessy is apathetic, impatient, thoughtless, cold, harsh, antisocial, hypocritical, is marked by pride and dissension, is rude and selfish. I feel like oftentimes I am over here on this side. I want to be on that side over there. I want to live my life from that over there. And that's what Paul is trying to get us to do throughout Romans 12 and throughout this series. He's showing us what a life of an effective Christian could look like. But it's also recognizing where we currently are. So how do we do that? How do we get from this side of the list to that side over there? Paul tells us in Romans 12, as he is starting to describe what a Christian could look like, he gives us a warning. He stops us and he says, look, don't think you're better than you really are. Be honest in your evaluation of yourselves. What Paul is doing is saying to try to get from this list to this list over here, it's going to take some honest evaluation of ourselves. We are going to have to realize that we have got something in the way. And that's something in the way of me living my life out of that list, out of the fruit, out of the power of the grace of God, is me. Hi. I'm the problem. It's me. I am what's standing in the way of getting over there. And to get over there, Paul is saying, I'm going to have to get over myself. Quite literally, get over myself. Now, don't mishear me. I'm not telling you the problem in your life is me. I'm telling you, the problem is you. It's all of us. We've got a me problem. And we're going to have to deal with that. We're not going to have this effective life of a Christian. We're not going to get to be marked by all these incredible, amazing things in our own faith life. We're not going to be marked by these incredible, amazing, powerful things in the life of our church if we can't get past ourselves. Say it with me. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Now, this problem kind of works itself out, I think, in two different ways. One is the me problem that we are willing to acknowledge, that we kind of know is there, but we tend to excuse in ourselves. We tend to justify in ourselves. Those are the things like, yeah, I know I was being extremely impatient in the parking lot, but I waited a really long time and I had some place to be, so I cut the entire line because I have somewhere to be right now. Or maybe you're like, yeah, I was pretty rude to that server, but that person needs to get better at their job. They just need to get better at their job. And what I did to them right there, or how I treat them, will help them. Will help them get better at their job. Or maybe it's something like, yeah, I drank too much again, but I deserve it. I had a rough week. These are the things that are holding us back and keeping us closer to this side of the list because we're not really willing to acknowledge it and because we tend to excuse it in ourselves when we see it. Why? Because we have this sense of entitlement. We have this sense of, well, I deserve the excuse. I deserve the exception. I can see some people blocking their eyes from the mirror. So apparently yourself is too hard to look at. I don't know what to tell you about that. Or maybe the lights are. All right, we'll move it that way. So we tend to excuse it in ourselves because of this sense of entitlement that we have. And it runs deep. Do you guys know that there's now been this phrase that's been coined in social media? It's called main character syndrome. Has anybody heard this phrase before, main character syndrome? What it applies to is that there's this social thing that's happening right now where people are acting like, and what this refers to, the main character in the story, and then everyone else is just kind of the extra in the movie of their life. And so you'll see this a lot. These are the people that you see that will like stop traffic to shoot a TikTok video. Or these are the people that will, you'll be waiting in a long line of traffic and you'll see this car go flying up on the side to bypass everything because they've got somewhere important to be, I guess. Or, maybe it's the people that anytime anybody holds them accountable in the world, they turn their video on and start videoing the situation so that people later can justify their reactions on social media. There is this growing sense of entitlement in our culture today. And Paul is calling that out in us. Even back then, he's telling us to deal with it. And it's something that drives me crazy. I mean, this just happened, I think just even going to the Friday night football game the other night. I was driving with my daughter and we're at a stop sign and I start going and a car just flies up and cuts me off. And this is not a rare occurrence, I have to admit. I have this list of things I usually say, and it goes usually something like this. I promise you there are no explicitives in this. That usually goes something like this. Oh, by all means, go right ahead. You've got somewhere important to be. I don't. I'm not headed anywhere important in my life, at least not in comparison to the all-important massive truck with the two massive mufflers. Go right ahead. You are so important. And I get worked up. I I get really angry at this. I realize this about myself even when living in California. Traffic just drives me crazy. And I get so frustrated at what I view as people's sense of entitlement while they're on the road, while they're driving. But what am I really mad at in that moment? It's not like as a minister, I'm there like, oh, I'm just disappointed that they're not living out all of God's potential in their life. That's not really what's happening in my reaction. What's happening in my reaction in that moment is I'm very upset at this person's audacity to assume that they are more important than me in this moment. Because what's important to me in this moment is me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. And my sense of entitlement, my sense of self-worth, to the negative degree. And Paul recognized this about us. That's why he said in Romans 12:3, do not think that you are better than you really are. Nobody wants to see a Christian that thinks they're better than everybody else. And he says again later in 12:16, don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't think you know it all. Also in Galatians 6:3, if you think you're too important to help someone, you're only fooling yourself. And maybe one of the harshest verses I've read in the New Living Translation in the Bible, you are not that important. Now, we spend a lot of time here at Hope telling you that you are important, that you matter to God, that you matter in this world. You have a role in this church. You have things to contribute, that you are important. But in relation to everybody else, you are not that important. Do you see the difference there? If we are starting to elevate ourselves and lowering other people in our view because we think that we deserve something or we're entitled to something that they're not, then we are making a mistake. And Paul is calling that out in us. And he's saying we cannot live on this side of the room. We cannot get over ourself if we cannot realize that we are not more important than anybody else. The ground is level at the foot of the cross. We are all sinners in need of grace. We all have a me problem that we are going to need to get past to be able to live into that life of an effective Christian. But Paul's telling us to stop and evaluate and look at how that works itself out. So, like I said, the first way that me problem shows itself in us is in those ways where we're aware of it, but maybe we don't really want to take the time or the energy to address it and deal with it. Maybe that sense of entitlement is getting in the way. Maybe pride is getting in the way. Maybe we think we know better than everybody else, and that has created something in us where we are pushing other people down. And Paul's saying, hey, stop. You're never going to live this Christian life the way you want to if we're constantly doing that. So that's the first kind. There is a second kind of me problem that is a little bit harder to deal with. And these are the things that maybe we're not aware of in ourselves. I want to tell you something about me that there's no way you could know unless I told you about it. I actually have quite a lot of numbness throughout my body that I'm dealing with. It all comes from different things. I ruptured a disc in my back several years ago, and I didn't get to rupture it in like any cool way. Like I didn't, get in a motorcycle accident or injured in football or something cool like that. I ruptured a disc in my sleep. Very exciting way to rupture a disc. I'm apparently a very aggressive sleeper. I don't know, I woke up and it was excruciating pain and it lasted a while and it damaged the nerves. It was addressed, but it damaged the nerves, and I have little spots of numbness all down my arm and into the tips of my fingers now today because of that. I also have numbness in the tip of my tongue from a dental accident when a dentist took their drill and accidentally cut a nerve underneath my tongue. I know, right? Worst case scenario. There's some people here that have a fear of dentists that just looked at their spouse and went, That's what I'm talking about. I'm going to be British. I'm never going to the dentist again. Ever. I'm sure they fixed their dental problems. But I have permanent numbness in the tip of my tongue because a nerve got sliced there. I also have permanent numbness here. This is completely numb right here. And that came from jaw surgery that I had about a month after I got married. I had a class 3 underbite. So my teeth did kind of point toward each other growing up, but as we started to correct it, and this was something that had to be addressed when I was like 18 or over, the teeth, when they got into the correct position, with my jaw clenched, I could take a piece of pizza and I could put it into my mouth, and it would go like 3/4 of the way into my mouth. The jaw was so bad. I could take French fries and just throw them right in my mouth with my jaw clenched. And so to fix that problem, about a month after I got married, they had to cut my jaw from my skull. This does not seem like things that people should do. I feel like the jaw should stay attached to the skull. But this was the plan, and they were apparently good at it. So they cut my jaw from my skull, moved it around to the proper position, put a bunch of brackets in there to hold it into place, wired my mouth shut for 2 weeks. It's always fun when I go to a new dentist and they take x-rays for the first time. They're like, okay, let's take a look at these. Goo! There's like metal everywhere. And I'm like, what happened to you? But because of that, they had to cut all the nerves here. And they said that, it could take about 2 years for it to come back, or there might be some permanent nerve damage. So I have permanent nerve damage. This whole area is numb. And for the most part, it's fine. I've adjusted. I've learned to get used to it. I don't really notice it unless I'm talking about it in front of a few hundred people. But there was this one time, so I was younger, and I went to Taco Bell because at the time I really enjoyed Taco Bell. It didn't cause the problems it does today when I go to Taco Bell. And I purchased one of my favorite things there, the grilled stuffed beef burrito, just this big, juicy, beefy burrito. I love this thing. Taco Bell is endorsing this message. And I got my burrito, I went and sat down, and I'm sitting there, and I'm starting to dig into it, and the grease is like pouring all over my fingers, and I realized like I didn't bring a napkin. And I'm like, that's okay, I've got a tongue. So I just started licking the grease off, and I'm enjoying this grilled stuffed beef burrito. And at one point I look up, and people at the table next to me are just kind of looking at me, and I'm like, hi, and I just like keep eating. And then I finish, and I, take my trash, and I box it up. I start walking over to the garbage can, and I see another table, and they're kind of looking at me. And I'm like, hi. I'm like, maybe they recognize me from church. I don't know. So then I go over to the garbage can, and I throw some stuff away, and I see some people in line looking at me, and I'm like, that's weird. And then, as I'm leaving, there's people coming in, so I hold the door open for them and smile at them as they're coming in, and they're walking in like, and I'm like, what's going on? I'm a little nervous now. So I get in my truck, and I'm just kind of sitting there thinking, I was like, what was that? Like, was it about to go down? Like, what just happened? And I was like, oh, let me take a look at myself. I grabbed the rearview mirror, and I look. And this time you have to remember, I didn't have a beard at this point. So I look, and there is a giant orange grease ring, like all over, like, it looked like I had a goatee, like this red, greasy goatee that was just there on my face. And everybody in the restaurant could see it, but I had absolutely no idea because I couldn't feel a thing and because I forgot to grab napkins. Everybody in that restaurant was aware of the problem that was extremely visible on my face, except for me. I wasn't able to see it. And I couldn't feel it. When it comes to getting over our me problem, like I said, there are the things that we're aware of in ourselves. These personality issues, these things. But then there's also these things that we can't see, or we don't want to see, or we won't see about ourselves. These are those secret sins, or those toxic traits, or those difficulties in our personality that maybe seep out in times of pressure or stress. some of these things are things that we even hide from ourselves. They're the parts that are the darkest parts of who we are that we just don't want to deal with, because dealing with is going to be a lot of work. And it's going to require a lot of honesty. Several years ago, a friend of mine gave me this book, and it was called Thriving Through Ministry Conflict. We had just gone through a pretty difficult season in the church that I was in at the time. And this pastor lovingly gave me this book. And the night he gave me the book, I took it home, and I flipped it over, and I read the back cover, and it said this on the jacket. Church conflict doesn't have to be an enemy that tears a congregation apart. By learning how to handle it wisely, pastors and church leaders can make resistance one of their most valuable allies. Far from fearing conflict, leaders can turn it into a catalyst for positive change and a stronger, more united church. I read that and I went, boring. And I took the book and I put it on a shelf where it sat for years until 2020. Something about 2020 told me it was time to read this book. For those that lived in 2020 and lived through COVID, it was a very stressful time, and we felt that in the church as well. I opened that book up and I read that, and flash forward, I have now probably given this book to over 20 people in my life. I gave it to every worship leader that Hope had on staff at the time. I gave it to Pastor Mike, to Pastor Jeremy, Pastor Pat. I have bought it for people that I supervised and forced them to read it and go through it with me. I have found this book to be extremely helpful for a lot of reasons, but one of the most helpful concepts in it is that it draws attention to this thing about ourselves that we tend to do, that when we find ourselves in conflict in the world, that we tend to find these people that make us angry for whatever reason. And it really just kind of irks us and really annoys. Maybe it's in the workplace, maybe it's in your family, maybe it's at school, maybe it's at the church. We meet these people and they just really get under our skin, and it bothers us, these interactions that we have with them. We lose sleep over it. Sometimes we can't eat. We have imaginary conversations with them, maybe real life arguments with them. And we just constantly are doing this with certain people in our lives. And a lot of people get tired of this constant conflict, and they're just like, you know what, it's not worth it. This job, this church, this family isn't worth this. And so they make a decision to leave, only to meet that same person again and again and again and again. Why? The book is pointing out because who we are meeting over and over and over again is ourself. The book was pointing out once again, hi, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. It says we have become so good at hiding the things that we hate about ourselves that we tend to take them and project them onto the people in our lives so that we can hate the worst parts of ourselves in somebody else before we're willing to look in the mirror and deal with them in ourselves. That's how good we are at not dealing with the me problem. And we're going to keep meeting these same people over and over again. We're going to keep having this same conflict over and over again. We're going to keep leaving jobs and churches and families over and over again because it isn't a problem with them, it's a problem with us. That's what Paul's talking about here when he says we have to be ready for some honest evaluation if we're ever going to be able to live out of this side, if we're ever going to be able to get over this me problem. We're going to have to get honest about who we really are. Now, I said this isn't a self-help message, but I want to give us something tangible to hold on to and not be like, okay, amen, bye, we suck. And that's the end of the message. First, we have to admit it. Step one, we have to admit we have this problem. We've got a me problem. We have these tendencies in us to try to push other people down and push ourselves up. We have these darkest parts of our heart that we project onto other people instead of dealing it with ourselves. We have to admit it. And the next thing we have to do is we have to address it. We have to be willing to address the problem. Part of that is being open and vulnerable with someone in our life, letting someone hold you accountable, letting someone talk into your life in loving and truthful ways to say, hey, do you know that when you get angry, that you tend to tear everyone else down in the room? Hey, do you know that when you get stressed, you pour that glass of wine a little bit taller than usual? Hey, do you know that these worst parts of yourself are coming out? Someone that loves you and is willing to walk through life with you, to help you address that me problem. So part of it is that of we need some people in our lives that can hold us accountable and that we're willing to be open with. The church is something that God has given us to do that, ironing, sharpening iron. If we can be that vulnerable with each other, that's part of the design of this. There's professional help out there that you can seek out if you haven't yet in this. But we have to be open to that. The second thing that we need to do is we got to call it what it is. We have got a me problem. We've got a me problem because we're sinners and because the problem is sin. That's the real problem. So we got to call it what it actually is. We have to be willing to be honest with ourselves and say, we have sin in our lives. We are sinners and we are in need of grace. Because the enemy wants us to stay stuck over here. He wants us to stay in this spot where we're weighed down by the sin and all the problems, and we don't ever think that even being on that side is even a hope or a possibility. He wants us to stay stuck over on this side. But the answer to our sin problem is Jesus. And I don't care if that's a familiar cliche you've heard too much, it's true, and so I'm going to say it. We've got a sin problem, and Jesus is the solution. That's what he came to do. 1 Peter 1, 18 and 19, for you know that God paid a ransom to save you from the empty life you inherited from your ancestors, and it was not paid with mere gold or silver, which lose their value. It was the precious blood of Christ, the sinless, spotless Lamb of God. He came as a ransom for us to pay the penalty of our sins so that we don't have to live in this anymore. Because of his death upon that cross, we can live in his grace and a life that bears fruit. But it's hard. It's hard to live that way. It's easy to be a Christian. It's hard to live a life that bears fruit sometimes because we got to be willing to take our me problem and put it on the cross every single day. Luke 9:23, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross daily, and follow me. We have got a me problem. But to get over that, Jesus has done everything needed. And we need to walk into the freedom and the grace that is available to us. Paul finishes this section off by saying the solution to the me problem is service. I'm going to wrap up here in a second, and I want to ask this question. This is a question that a pastor once asked me. When you picture Jesus, where do you picture him? And I'm asking you this right now. In your mind, when you picture Jesus, where do you picture him? Do you picture him on a throne? Do you picture him in a chariot? Or do you picture him where he told us we should be, where he said he would be, at our feet? When the pastor first told me this, I had this reaction. No, Jesus is not at my feet. I'm at Jesus' feet. And he said to me, but Jesus said, if you're going to follow me, you need to be willing to do this. And Jesus served his disciples in this way. What Jesus was trying to get us to understand was the solution to the me problem. The solution to our propensity to try to elevate ourselves is to know that we were called to serve. In the same way that Jesus did. Philippians 2:7, it says, instead he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave. If we are going to be highly effective Christians, then we have to be willing to serve from the feet of those in our lives. We have to be willing to wash feet and to not think of ourselves higher than we ought to. That's some of the steps for getting over the me problem we have and start living life from this over here. A life that bears fruit. Can you imagine what God would do with a life that looks like this? Because this is what Jesus looks like. And this isn't a self-help sermon. This is a discipleship sermon. Because our goal is to look more like Christ. But we're not going to see it if we're constantly looking down at ourself. Like many of you this past summer, I got super swept up in the Olympics. I love Olympics. I set up 3 TVs in my living room every single year, and we watch all the things, all of them. We love it. I happened to be watching the women's volleyball, sand volleyball gold medal match between Brazil and Canada when something very interesting happens. There was a skirmish, a little fight on the court between the Canadian players and one of the Brazil players, Silva Ramos. But that's not the incredible thing. The incredible thing is what happened after that. In the midst of the fight and the tension, the DJ of the volleyball court recognized what was going on, and he cued the song Imagine by John Lennon in hopes to change people's perspective. Take a look. This moment was so incredible, I think, to see because 3 out of the 4 volleyball players recognized in that moment that there's something bigger here than me. That they're a part of something kind of special. That the Olympics uses John Lennon's Imagine at every opening ceremony to remind the athletes of what they're there for, of unity and sport, but with a spirit of camaraderie. 3 of the players in that moment acknowledged it, and you could see the smiles on their face. That DJ was brilliant in that moment to remind them of what the bigger picture is. But one player couldn't see it. One player couldn't get over herself and to see what the whole rest of the stadium saw. A different spirit, a different unity that was available. We have this opportunity as a church, as believers in Christ, to live our lives out of this, out of what Paul is calling out. What would it look like to be Christians, to be a church that people would describe as, hey, Hope Waukee is generous, harmonious, affectionate, hospitable, respectful, sympathetic, enthusiastic, benevolent, sincere, patient, marked by humility, that Hope Waukee is discerning. Could you imagine what God can do with a church all committed to that? Now, we're not called to perfection. We're still sinners saved by grace, and we're going to mess up. And we're going to look like this list every once in a while because there is no perfect person in perfect church. But what would our lives, what would our church look like if we could get past ourselves? If we could recognize, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. But I want a life that bears fruit. if we could get our heads up and see all that God has for us.